I grew up knowing I was never my dad's favorite. He never said out loud, but I felt it in every look, every dismissive shrug, every time he praised someone else while ignoring me. After my parents divorced, he remarried quickly, and with his new wife came her daughter, Claire. She was 2 years younger than me, but from the moment she entered our house, she became his little princess. I was 15 then, old enough to notice how he softened his voice when talking to her, how he proudly showed her drawings to his friends, while mine ended up forgotten in a drawer. "She's so talented," he would beam, ruffling her hair. I used to sit there silently, my chest tightening, waiting for him to look at me the same way. But he never did. If I got a good grade, it was, well, that's what's expected. If Claire got a good grade, it was, she's brilliant, just like her mother. Every family dinner was the same theater, Claire shining, Dad applauding, and me fading into the background. The worst part was how he justified it. He told me I was stronger, that I didn't need as much attention, that Claire had been through a lot with the divorce of her own parents. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think maybe he was right. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had been replaced. And the older we got, the more obvious it became. By the time I went off to college, Dad barely called. But every holiday season, I saw the photos online. Him and Claire at family gatherings I hadn't even been invited to. She became his daughter in everyone's eyes. I was just the other one. I thought I had learned to live with it, to accept that I didn't have a father the way Claire did. Until one invitation arrived in the mail. An elegant envelope with gold lettering, embossed with flowers. Claire was getting married, and I was expected to sit quietly in the background again. But this time, I wasn't going to. The invitation lay on my desk for days, taunting me. Together with their families, Claire Anderson and Matthew Collins invite you. Families. The word stung. My dad's name was printed proudly, as if he'd raised her, as if she was truly his flesh and blood. My name wasn't anywhere. Not even a mention. I almost tore it up. I almost told myself I wouldn't go, that it wasn't worth reopening old wounds. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, avoiding it would only prove what they believed, that I didn't belong. So I made a decision. I wasn't just going to attend Claire's wedding. I was going to remind my father that I was his daughter too, whether he liked it or not. The weeks before the wedding, I worked harder than ever. I chose a dress that made me feel powerful, not flashy, not desperate, but elegant. Something that whispered confidence instead of screaming for attention. I wanted to walk into that room and force them to see me, not the invisible shadow they had shoved aside for years. Still, part of me trembled at the thought of facing him. I hadn't seen Dad in nearly 2 years. The last time, we'd fought after he forgot my birthday, again. His excuse? He was too busy helping Claire move into her new apartment. When I said it hurt, he told me I was being dramatic. That conversation ended with me hanging up on him, and I hadn't heard from him since. Now I was about to see him again, not in some quiet room where emotions could be buried, but in front of an entire audience of family, friends, and strangers. The day of the wedding came faster than I expected. I drove to the venue with my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding, so hard I thought it might drown out the sound of the radio. The grand country estate was decorated with white roses and fairy lights, like something out of a movie. Guests milled about in designer dresses and sharp suits. I felt their eyes on me as I walked in, some flickers of recognition, others confusion. But the moment I spotted him, my father, laughing with Claire as if she were his only child, I felt years of hurt boiling to the surface. He hadn't even noticed me yet, but he would. I stood near the entrance for a moment, clutching my small purse, watching him. My father looked older but not weaker. His suit was perfectly tailored, his hair silvering at the edges, and his smile, the one I used to crave, was reserved only for Claire. She was radiant, dressed in silk for the pre-ceremony photos, laughing like the center of the universe. He held her hand, kissed her cheek, posed beside her for pictures. He looked proud, almost glowing. And then his gaze swept the room and landed on me. For a second, he froze. I thought maybe he would break into that smile, maybe he'd say my name, rush over, embrace me. But instead, he blinked, nodded stiffly, and turned back to Claire. Just like that. A rush of heat burned through me. I could almost hear the echo of all the times I'd been sidelined. It was happening again, even here at her wedding. I was nothing but a footnote. I walked further in, refusing to let it crush me. I greeted a few distant relatives, people who hadn't seen me in years. "You've grown into such a beautiful young woman," one aunt said, but I saw the confusion in her eyes, as if she wasn't sure where I fit anymore. At the family table, a card marked my place. Not near my father, not near the bridal party, but at the far end, close to the catering entrance. Like a guest. Not family. I sat down, my stomach churning, forcing myself to breathe. I told myself to stay calm, to wait for my moment, because deep inside I knew it would come. There was no way I could let this day pass without finally reclaiming what had been taken from me. As I watched my father raise his glass to toast the couple before the ceremony began, a bitter thought crossed my mind. If he wanted to pretend I wasn't part of this family, then I would remind him. Not with a fight, not with tears, but with something far more powerful. And the chance arrived sooner than I expected. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I'll admit that. Claire walked down the aisle in a gown that sparkled in the sunlight, her smile flawless, her groom beaming at her, as if she were made of light. People dabbed their eyes, whispered about how perfect it all was. And at the very front, my dad stood taller than ever, his arm linked with hers, as if giving her away was the greatest honor of his life. I sat in the second row, invisible. Not a single glance came my way. Not from him, not from Claire, not from anyone who mattered. The vows were exchanged, rings slipped on fingers, kisses sealed with applause. And then came the part one had been waiting for. The reception. After the first dance and endless toasts praising Claire and Matthew, the MC called for the family speeches. One by one, relatives stood up. My dad gave a heartfelt speech about how proud he was of Claire, calling her his little girl, his greatest blessing. I sat there, gripping the edge of my chair, every word driving into me like a nail. And then the MC made a mistake. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake, maybe it was fate. And now, we'll hear a few words from Claire's sister. Gasps, murmurs. Heads turned toward the bridal table, where her bridesmaids sat. Claire's biological sister shook her head nervously. "Not me," she whispered. The MC frowned, scanning the room, and then his eyes landed on me. "Ah, yes. You. Please come up." The room shifted. Every face turned toward me, some confused, some surprised, others whispering already. My father's eyes widened, his expression darkening. He started to rise from his chair, as if to stop me, but it was too late. I was already standing. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I walked toward the microphone. My heart pounded in my ears, but my voice, when I spoke, was steady. "Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, and I'm guessing that's most of you, I'm also this family's daughter." The silence that followed was absolute. For a moment, no one breathed. The microphone amplified my words, sharp and clear, slicing through the perfect little illusion my father had built. I let the silence hang before I continued. I grew up in this family too. Maybe I wasn't the one who got the applause, the praise, or the spotlight, but I was there. I was the daughter who learned to clap quietly from the corner, the one who smiled even when no one noticed me. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A few heads turned toward my father, whose jaw was set, his face pale. Claire looked stunned, her hand clutching her new husband's arm. "I won't lie," I said, my throat tightening but my voice refusing to break. It hurt. Watching my dad call someone else's pride and joy while forgetting I even existed, it broke me. But standing here today, I realized something important. I don't need to beg for a place in this family anymore. I already have one, whether anyone here likes it or not. Gasps scattered applause, even a few murmured bravos from relatives I barely knew. My father shifted uncomfortably, his hand tightening on his wine glass. "And to Claire," I added, turning toward her, "I truly hope your marriage brings you happiness. But I won't let this day erase me. I am his daughter too, and I deserve to be seen." The room erupted in conflicting reactions. Some clapped, some whispered, some looked away, unsure what to do. But all I could see was my father. His eyes locked on mine, a mix of anger, shame, and something else he couldn't hide anymore, guilt. For the first time in years, I felt taller than him. When I stepped down from a microphone, the air in the hall was thick with tension. Conversations buzzed like angry bees, half hidden behind polite smiles. I walked back to my seat, my pulse still racing, my legs trembling under the weight of what I'd just done. I didn't even sit before my father stormed over. He leaned close, his voice low, but sharp enough to cut. "What the hell was that? You think this was the time or place?" I looked up at him, refusing to flinch. "It was the only time or place. You've ignored me for years, Dad. Did you really think I'd stay silent forever?" For a moment, I thought he might shout. His face was flushed, his fists clenched at his sides. But then I saw it, the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Because he knew I was right. Claire, still at the bridal table, stood up and joined us. Her expression wasn't angry, not exactly, more like bewildered. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice softer than I expected. "This is supposed to be my day." I met her gaze. "And it still is. I didn't take anything from you, Claire. I only took back what's always been mine." That silenced her. For once, she didn't have an easy answer. The rest of the evening was complicated. Some relatives came to me quietly, whispering that they admired my courage. Others avoided me, clearly siding with my father. But I noticed something important. No one dared dismiss me anymore. Not after what I said. At the dinner table, my father barely touched his food. He kept glancing at me, as if unsure what to say. Claire tried to keep smiling for her guests, but her eyes kept drifting toward us, her laughter a little too forced. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. And I wasn't done yet, because the real moment came later that night when my father finally cornered me outside the hall. The night was cool outside the reception hall, the fairy lights glowing softly against the garden hedges. I had stepped out for air, my chest still tight from a whirlwind inside. That's when I heard his voice behind me. "Why would you humiliate me like that?" I turned. My father stood there, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his tie loosened, but his pride still wrapped around him like armor. His face was tense, his eyes narrowed. "I didn't humiliate you," I said evenly. "I told the truth. You've been pretending I don't exist for years. Tonight, I refuse to play along." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You don't understand. Claire needed me more. She needed you more." I cut him off, my voice trembling with years of swallowed anger. "I was your child too. I needed you too. But you decided one daughter was enough. And it wasn't me." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. For the first time, he didn't have a ready defense. "Do you know what it feels like," I continued, tears burning my eyes, "to watch your father beam at someone else while you sit there invisible? To wait for a phone call on your birthday that never comes? To scroll through pictures of family holidays you weren't even invited to? You didn't just replace me, Dad. You erased me." The words landed. He looked at me like I'd just punched the air out of him. His shoulders sagged slightly, and for a second, he wasn't the proud, untouchable man I grew up fearing. He was just guilty. "I thought you were stronger," he muttered finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," I said firmly. "I became stronger because you gave me no choice. But don't mistake survival for being unbreakable. You broke me a long time ago. Tonight was about showing you I'm still here. And I always will be." He stared at me, his jaw working, but no words came. For the first time, it wasn't me who felt small. The silence between us stretched, heavy and raw. I could hear music faintly from inside, the band playing something upbeat, guests laughing, glasses clinking. A whole celebration carried on, oblivious to the storm brewing in the garden. My father finally spoke, his voice lower, almost uncertain. "I never meant to hurt you. Claire came into my life at a time when everything was falling apart. She needed stability, and I gave it. Maybe I overcompensated." "Overcompensated?" I echoed bitterly. "Dad, you didn't just give her stability. You gave her everything. And me? You left me with scraps, and then acted like I should be grateful for them." He winced. It was subtle, but I saw it. For once, my words reached him. Before he could respond, footsteps approached. Claire. Her veil had been removed, her hair loose now, her makeup smudged slightly from hours of smiling and dancing. She looked between us, sensing the weight of what had been said. "Dad," she said softly, then turned to me. "And you. Please, can we not do this here? This is my wedding." I met her eyes. For the first time, there wasn't arrogance or superiority there. Just discomfort. maybe even understanding. "I'm not here to ruin your wedding, Claire," I said quietly. "But you need to hear this too. You stepped into a space that wasn't empty. My father already had a daughter. You may not have meant it, but you became the reason he erased me." Claire's lips parted, but no words came. She looked at Dad, then back at me. The realization was sinking in, the truth too loud to ignore. Dad rubbed his temple, exhaling hard. "I thought I was doing what was best for everyone," he muttered. "But maybe I was wrong." That was the closest thing to an admission I'd ever heard from him. And for once, he didn't look at Claire for reassurance. He looked at me. And that was the moment I realized he couldn't run from me anymore. When we returned inside, it was impossible to hide the shift. A few guests glanced at us curiously, sensing something had happened in the garden. Claire tried to plaster on her smile again, but her laughter sounded brittle, like thin glass ready to crack. My father walked slightly behind me, his expression unreadable. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking under his shadow, he was the one following mine. At the dinner tables, conversations had changed. I heard snippets of whispers. "Did you know he had another daughter? She's the one who spoke earlier, right? Why didn't anyone mention her before?" Some were confused, others critical, but many were sympathetic. And for the first time in years, the words were about me. Not Claire, not my father. Me. The bride and groom returned to the dance floor for the father-daughter dance. My chest tightened as the spotlight fell on them. The music swelled, Claire smiled nervously, and Dad put his hand on her shoulder. I could see his lips move as he whispered something to her, something reassuring. But when his eyes lifted, they found me across the room. For just a second, his hand faltered. Claire noticed it too. She glanced back at me, her smile weakening, as if realizing the dance no longer felt as pure as it had been in her head all these years. After the applause, the DJ invited all daughters to dance with their fathers. A flood of women in elegant gowns and their graying dads filled the floor. I stayed seated, my fingers tracing the rim of my glass. This wasn't my moment, I thought, until I saw Dad walking toward me. The crowd seemed to part around him. He stopped at my table. His voice wasn't booming, wasn't authoritative. It was low, almost tentative. "Would you dance with me?" I stared at him. Part of me wanted to say no, to punish him with the same rejection he'd given me for years. But the eyes of the room were on us. And more importantly, a voice deep inside me whispered, "This is your chance. Take it back." So I stood. Gasps rippled through the hall as I placed my hand in his. The music began, not a romantic ballad, but something softer, gentler. We moved awkwardly at first, both stiff, strangers in a role we should have known by heart. But then, little by little, the rhythm carried us. "Everyone's watching," he muttered. "Good," I replied, lifting my chin. "Let them see the daughter you forgot." He closed his eyes briefly, as if the weight of my words pressed down on him. And in that moment, I felt the balance shift. For years, he had defined who I was in this family. Tonight, I was defining it for myself. As the song ended, scattered applause filled the hall. It wasn't as loud as the cheers for Claire earlier, but it didn't need to be. It was enough. People had seen me, recognized me, acknowledged me. And when I stepped off that dance floor, I knew I had reclaimed something far more important than just a place at a table. I had reclaimed myself. The rest of the night passed in fragments, the clinking of glasses, the buzz of whispered speculation, the forced smiles of a bride trying to hold her perfect day together. I stayed until dessert, long enough for people to see me, long enough for my father to feel my presence like a weight he could no longer shrug off. When I finally stood to leave, I didn't sneak out quietly. I walked through the room with my head high. Some guests reached out to squeeze my hand or whisper words of support. Others just stared, as if they were only now realizing I had existed all along. At the door, my father caught up with me. His voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want this to be the last time I see you." For a moment, I hesitated. I wanted to say everything I had bottled up for years. But instead, I gave him the truth in its simplest form. "You don't get to decide that anymore. If you want me in your life, prove it. Otherwise, I've already learned how to live without you." His face crumpled, the proud mask slipping for just a second. But I didn't stay to comfort him. I had done my part. I had spoken, I had stood tall, and I had taken back what was always mine, the right to be seen. Outside, the night air was crisp and freeing. I breathed it in deeply, my dress swaying around my legs as I walked to my car. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not because my father had finally changed, I didn't know if he ever would, but because I had. At her wedding, I hadn't ruined anything. I had reclaimed everything. And as I drove away, the headlights cutting through the dark, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was me, and that was enough.